Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am especially excited to be hosting this. I know that most of you haven't seen me in one of our classes since the first class, and I think that it is pretty cool that I get to finish off with all of you leading this discussion. And when I say leading, I'm really going to be a witness most of the time and prompting a couple questions if they come up to make sure that we get everyone's questions answered. Without further ado, I am extremely honored that I get to introduce both Dr. Saida Pepra and Linda Marie Jones. I was getting formal for you, Linda. As our guest speakers, they will be representing Black women birthing justice this evening. We're going to hear all about who they are, what they do, and talking about taking back our power and organizing for birth justice. I do want to say real quick that when I identified that I wanted Black women birthing justice to come and speak to our program, it did require me to demonstrate that I was not here to co-opt information and that I was not here to try and make it seem like we are something that we are not. It is important that we center Black voices. It is important that we center the experience of Black birthers, and we have not had the opportunity to do that yet in this program, which is why I am especially honored and excited for this talk. I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alana. We are really, I know I'm really excited to be able to have conversations with folks in different parts of the world. Canada has not really been on the grid a lot for the conversations. And yet, in my experience, like having been to Toronto and having family members that live there, there's a lot of shared experiences that we don't actually get to have this exchange as much. So I know that all the audience isn't in Canada, but it is nice to be able to make those connections because we're not that far and we share some histories. So yeah. So we are Black Women Birthing Justice. It's a collective, and so there's a bunch of us. But this is Linda, the co-founder, and I came on in 2016 and have been helping a lot with, started off with the Battling Over Birth report, which we'll talk about. But I guess we'll get into it. So who are we? How do we get started, Linda?
Well, as you can see here, I'm not really good at regurgitating from slides, so I'm just going to free.
She was there.
I was
as
there.
the co-founder. So.
She did.
It started as two women talking in a conversation about their birth stories, and they both had different experiences, but both fairly traumatic experiences. And these were Black women who were upper middle class professors, educated people, and they said, you know, this was our story. What's it like for other Black women? So to answer that question, they threw their net out and found a group of Black women to come sit in the living room and see what we could do about finding the answer to that. So it turned out that we made ourselves into a collective of women who identify as African American, and we decided that we wanted to do an action research project, which would be to speak with 100 Black women. We came up with that nice round number of 100 Black women in California to find out what their birth stories were like. And so we did that, and as you can see, this is kind of our vision of what we wanted to get from those stories. And so we compiled the stories into a book called Battling Over Birth that we'll get into later. But basically, we're a group of Black women who want to impact the maternal mortality issue that's happening in America right now.
Absolutely.
And that's me. And I'm a birth postpartum doula. I've been a doula for 30 years. I'm kind of like the grandmother of the Bay Area as far as birth doulas go. I'm a photographer, author. I'm a mom, a grandma, a great grandma, and I'm much older than I appear.
She looks good.
I've been a part of the birth and advocacy the whole birth kind of community for a long time. It's very near and dear to my heart. And when Janeri, who was one of the two women who was having the conversation, called on me, she did so because I was her doula. And I ended up moving across the street from her. So she said she was bringing her village to help her raise her daughter. So it's a very, very cohesive group of women who come together, all of us doing several different things, but being very cohesive and all on the same path. So.
Awesome. And my name is Saida Pepra, and I came to Black Women Birthing Justice. It's very synchronistic. A bunch of folks that I knew thought that I was really connected in some ways to the organization, and I hadn't heard of them. And so they were like, well, you have to be connected to them because they're in Los Angeles. I mean, they're in California, and they're, doing birth work for Black women. And so when I, reached out to them, one of the things that I love about Black Women Birthing Justice is it's a group of Black women who are just like sisters for each other first. And we start out, our meetings really centering like how we're doing. And so it's a lot about, spreading information that each of us have used to heal ourselves and understand our own family dynamics and understand our own birthing experience and really empower ourselves. But like all the things that we have individually had to do for ourselves, we're then bringing it to the collective. And in all of our different professional capacities. Some folks are doulas, others are, professors. I'm a therapist and psychologist and a doula. And we have activists and we have research folks. And it's a really great team of people who have their own life experience to bring to the table, to bring it to each other, and then for us to bring it to the world. And so that is something I think that's really important about BWBJ. And my work has been in, I'm a clinical psychologist by trade and have worked always in, at risk and high risk and marginalized and underserved and just all the various types of populations. I've in the past 6.5 years have been working in the federal prison system. I've worked in homeless shelters and domestic violence shelters and community mental health and psychiatric hospital. And so for me, just seeing where these systems meet the most vulnerable people and don't really have the capacity emotionally, they don't have enough empathy, there's not enough cultural understanding already for whoever comes in. Even if I have a white male individual who has schizophrenic presentation, or a white woman who's coming in with challenges with depression, the system in and of itself is hard on people who are suffering, and then let alone have brown and Black skin that, really has people associate you with all the negative stereotypes of the world. And whatever is difficult for, the average sort of like dominant social paradigm white, person, it's, 10 times harder a lot of times for us because we have all these other socio cultural issues around it, whether we have money or not. It doesn't, I always say it doesn't matter if, I show up to the hospital, nobody knows I'm Dr. So-and-so. I get a hospital gown, I'm just a Black girl sitting on the table, and however you feel about Black girls sitting on the table is how you're going to treat me. And so I think that we find a lot of that in BWBJ and in our stories, listening to other women, we found that as well. And that's enough about me. Some of our goals, as Linda has already talked about, education, really documenting birth stories. There's been so many, even I think, that starting out having stories from within the collective, and then all of us being able to hear each other's stories and hear the advocacy that people have had to do and the information that they had to use and ways that people have helped each other. You have to document that. I mean, somebody has to know that these things are happening, and Battling Over Birth Report really has helped to create that. Raising awareness about birth alternatives, using doulas, using midwives, going to OBs, hospitals. There's so many options that you could have. And so a lot of people and going to birth centers, having a home birth, and that isn't necessarily as common knowledge for women in the Black community as it is for a lot of white women. It's been very like pop culture to do home births and have a doula and all these like sort of alternative options, and it has sort of like left out individuals in the Black community unless they have money and sort of like affluence and are connected to those worlds. And that, felt very unfair, to those of us on the collective. And so there's a lot of conversation about how to bring that information to folks too.
Yeah, it's really important. I think our biggest goal is to educate Black women around their choices around birth. You talk to Black, and because, like, to us and all those people who are listening to us, the word doula seems to be very mainstream, and I think everybody thinks everybody knows what that is. But if you go to the Black community right now and ask 10 people what a doula is, maybe one of them will be able to answer your question.
Yeah.
So it's really important to do that. And the one person who might know what it is will probably say, "Oh, that's something for Jewish women, right?"
Right. Yeah.
That's not. Why are you doing
Yeah.
that? So it's a white woman thing, and we have to change that message, because the safest place for us to have our babies is probably at home right now.
Yeah.
And we have to let people understand that it's okay to do that. And by hearing other people's stories, because there's a lot of the stories are people who had home births that were Black, and to hear that other people that look like you are doing this, it kind of legitimizes it, and I think that's really important.
And for those that do need to go to the hospital or want to or don't have other options, that they should be able to still have a birth that they want in a hospital, and that they should know what their rights are, that they should have, support for the experience that they're wanting to have, and that people need information. People need to know what they need to know so they can go in and have that experience. And, wanting to make sure that that's available to us as well as it is to other communities. So in general, the people are very used to the term reproductive justice. And so one of the things that birth justice as a term really brings up is that it's not just about, first of all, like natural birth. It's not just about like, having your natural birth with your midwife and your doula, and that's like the way to get your birth justice. That it's part of a wider movement, that it's more than that. Reproductive justice is sort of like within the same sort of constructs and connection between reproductive justice, dismantling inequalities of race, gender, class, sexuality, and all of those factors, that this is all a part of that. And so I think, there is something very unique about the term birth justice, because it's a lot more about like the individual's experience, and them having the births that they want to have when they want to have it, if they don't want to have it, and just having autonomy in all those aspects as individuals. And Linda talked about the Battling Over Birth report. There was also another book prior to that. Maybe you can talk about that book.
Birthing Justice is a compilation of stories that were edited by Julia Chenier-Parra and Alicia Bonaparte from LA. And there's stories in there from everyone from midwives to doulas to a trans person. They're telling their stories around what happened in their experiences with birth. And it's just a really compelling group of narratives that's really important to read.
One of the things that that really, I would say really bad, not Battling Over Birth, but that Black women, birth and justice has really highlighted sort of like in the Black maternal health movement, is that it's very important for us, just as a community of folks coming together, to be recognizing all the people in the Black community that are marginalized, and typically the LGBTQ community had been sort of left out of that conversation. And so it had just been about really just cisgendered, Black women, presenting, and that there are other people in the community that are also having challenges that we're also facing, and having other challenges, and like being able to sort of like, who's going to capture their stories as well, and like, why do their stories have to be captured outside of the Black community, right? And so just being able to have a space as well where all the stories of people who are birthing and having families in the Black community can contribute to, and have a place where people can hear from. And I think that there is always going to be a need to have more conversations. I mean, it's like even the Battling Over Birth report, we haven't finished hearing all the stories of experiences that people have. And so that those things should continue on.
And so, also, I just want, we have those on our reading list. So
awesome.
Yay. Good
If
for
you
you,
haven't,
Alana.
Yes, that's our recommendation. Read the Battling Over Birth Report. Just hear the stories of individuals. I mean, that's the best education that I found for all the education that I have. Knowing people's actual real stories is what informs me about how to support them.
And that's kind of what made our research stand out over all the other birth research that's out there, because there are all kinds of research that have graphs and data and statistics, and after about 3 pages in, you're like, and it's not really helping the cause, but we found that having people tell their actual story of what happened to them and their birth experience, it's so compelling. Every time we've had an event where we have people read these stories from the book, I mean, people cry, because they hear this for the first time. And most people don't believe that these things are going on and that these things are happening to Black women when they go and they're in these institutions and have to deal with people in clinics, and even having midwives who don't quite get the fact that they are a human being, and to hear it from a first person narrative is so much different than reading statistics, because it's a truth, and the way we got women to answer these questions, we asked them one question: did your birth look like what you had envisioned it to be? And that was the question that they answered, and how we got the stories. And usually the answer was no, didn't even come close. Yeah. And so the way we did this is we had what we called sharing circles. It was all very, very spiritual. We brought them in a number of between 5 and 6 women. We had daycare for their kids. We fed them. We had candles and incense, but we were recording their stories. And sometimes it was the first time that they've told their birth story,
a lot of
because
times.
Nobody wants to hear your birth story, really. If they're not a doula or a midwife, we really don't.
For everyone here,
They're both alive in the story. So this was the first time they were able to tell how they felt about giving birth to their child. And many times I sat and I witnessed most of them, if not, I didn't do all of them, but most of them. And many times I left there in tears, because it's just to hear how we're treated just to go in and have our child. It's so wrong. And it's, and my birth stories were just as traumatic as anybody else's. And so it's just a really, really good way of people understanding what birth justice is and how we don't have it right now and how we need to get to it.
And for the people in the collective to understand how research works too, because with Chinyere,
we had no idea.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, let's just ask the questions and, see what the community has to say. I know, but there's the formal research process, and in order for it to be recognized as something that people are going to, in the dominant culture, recognize as research, there is a certain way that it typically needs to be done. And, with the support of Dr. Chinyere Opara, who was really able to bring in the academic portion and to be able to support the real grassroots research. It really gave everybody the opportunity to participate in research, which otherwise is left for people with degrees and in academic settings. But also for that actual culture of getting knowledge to come down to where you're going to actually get real stories, not just stories that people are comfortable to say in front of you when you're like an outsider. Like this was like women from the community doing, circles that felt like a sister circle, right? And it was very relaxing and comforting. And also was a really strong healing space for a lot of folks, especially those of us also who were witnessing and experiencing the stories. And so that's, the other part of it too, is to be able to bring research from the community by the community to the world.
And a lot of them had to be healed from that story. And by talking about it, they did get a healing from telling the stories, and many of them joined our collective afterwards, because they said, we need to do this for other people. So it was an amazing experience.
I wanted to mention, with respect to the power, it's very similar, the parallel, particularly with our Indigenous community right now around storytelling.
Yeah.
And the importance of remembering and then passing those stories on. And I really believe that the movements that are happening, for example, with the work that you're doing and other folks that are doing similar work, I think that it's energetically being felt.
Yeah.
Because like Bianca and I were in Kentucky and we got into an Uber
Right after being with Saida.
literally right after being with you, Saida. And she just started telling us her birth story.
Wow.
Wow.
Like,
Did
just
you know you were
and
birth
she-
markers?
No.
No, we told her after
That's wild.
That's story. We
You
were like,
brought
"Do you
that with
actually-"
you.
It was because
I guess so. That medicine, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, she was black, and she just jumped right into it, and right into
she
just
almost died. And her
how
baby
she almost died, and she
Oh,
like,
wow.
and just all of it. And it was obvious that I think she even said that she had never shared that. She did. She told us she had never shared that, and she's like, I don't know
Wow.
why.
Yeah, she 21.
Anyway, I'm saying like that's being felt. So you're
Yeah.
right. That power, it's being felt, and it's having an effect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think
agree.
all of us that have stories that the world hasn't heard and need to hear it, and that we haven't told ourselves we need to hear it. You know, it's time for that. I love that. Yay. Okay, so getting down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
We had lots of questions, even in coming up with this topic and what are we going to talk about? We wanted to give you guys a bit of a sense of who we are, but then we also really wanted to like debrief and offer up some perspectives that typically, I mean, I think, you know, are going to be conversations that we have among ourselves and maybe don't have sometimes because who's sitting there asking, you know, us questions like this. So do you want to ask us the questions? Should we just answer the questions? How do we do it?
I think it would be fun if I asked you some of these questions.
Okay.
Unless, well, I think it would be fun, but
We want to make it fun.
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Why do we need Black birth workers?
Well, let me.
You can go with the grandma.
We can-
on this one.
Yeah.
That's always so funny. Like that, I just asked that question. Like,
We'll go with Granny on this one. First of all, I've kind of lived long enough and have done this work long enough to live my dream. When I first started doing this work, there were very few Black birth workers. There were some, but not a lot. So as opposed to having maybe one page of them in the whole Bay Area, you know, and there was like maybe 2 pages of all the doulas put together, and we were by maybe a quarter of that list. I always thought, and when I started out, I was doing volunteer work at with a clinic that delivered at one of the major hospitals in Berkeley, California. And what we did is there was like 10 of us that were just trained, and we wanted to get experience, and there was a clinic that was opening. So we went to this clinic and we said, you know, we're doulas and we really love to come and volunteer for the women who are coming to the clinic, who were teenage moms, low income, uninsured people. So they said, sure. So we made up a little flyer and it said, we're doulas. This is what a doula does. And if you'd like to have a doula, tell us a little bit about the person you'd like to have with you. So many of them were young Black girls. So the ones that sent the flyer back said, we want somebody Black and we want somebody older. Well, older or younger, I was the only Black one. So I felt like if they were smart enough to ask for a doula, I would be there for them. So for like a year, I volunteered and I did between 4 and 5 births a month with this group. And it was an amazing experience because it gave me a lot of education because they saw midwives in the clinic, the midwives delivered them at the hospital. So I learned the whole hospital system. I learned the nurses. I learned some of who the doctors were, but I also learned how midwives did birth versus how doctors did birth. And to see how these young women reacted to my being in their presence was truly amazing. You know, I didn't kind of realize how powerful it was at the time, but looking back on it, I'm thinking, wow, you know. And there were so many of them. And at that time, Medi-Cal was not picking up epidural. So if you wanted an epidural, you had to pay for out of pocket. So of course they couldn't pay for it. So so they learned.
know about
So they learned. So I had to learn how to take care of people who were unmedicated.
Oh my gosh.
And teenagers a lot. They're very dramatic, those teenagers. But they birth well. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
But it was a really good experience to be there for them. And they looked to me like their mom or their grandma or whatever it was. Because some of the, the youngest person I was with was like 13. And I did it with another friend of mine because I said, I can't take this on by myself. And through the whole labor, she just grabbed on and held me the whole time. I mean, she didn't want people you could tell she had been molested because she didn't want the doctors to even touch her. We had to really work to let her examine her to do an internal exam. But she managed to push out her little boy. But I can remember one of them wrote me a note afterwards and said, my mom was here, but she didn't really support what I was doing. And I felt that you really supported me in this, and I will never forget you. Start crying. But to me, it's just really, really important to have someone who looks like you attend your birth. It's a very, very personal, emotional time. And you need someone that you don't have to be a certain way with. And any of you who are listening to this who are Black know exactly what I'm talking about. We have a Black presence and we have a white presence as a Black person. And you don't need to have that white presence when you're trying to push out a human being. You can't. And so you need to have someone with you who is from your culture, who looks like you, who understands crazy Uncle Joe for whatever reason you decide to have in the birth room with you, and not be afraid of him, because we all have a crazy Uncle Joe, and we know he's just, a little different, but he's safe.
He's there. Yeah,
and he's going to be there, and she wanted him there. And we're not afraid of that. We just say, go sit down, Uncle Joe. We don't need you over here right now. So you need to have people who understand the culture that you're in. And by no means am I an expert on Blackness. We were just talking, and I grew up in a very rural little town, which was all white. I think I was the only Black kid in my kindergarten. There might be 3 of us in my kindergarten class of 30. And so I've always been the one of. In my past life, I worked for a large corporation, and I was the one of. And so I'm used to that. And I used to joke with people and say, if you sat me down in the ghetto someplace, I would last maybe a half hour, because I don't understand that culture. But on the other hand, I can go to that culture and be okay with it. I can be as comfortable in that situation as I am with millionaires that I work with. I'm okay with that.
Which she does.
Yes, she does.
I do. And so I'm comfortable no matter where I am, but that's because of who I am and how I was raised. Everybody is not like that. But all that said and done, I feel like it's really, really important to have somebody that you can feel comfortable with. And the second part of having someone who's Black be your doula is that you may have this person at your birth, and she could be a young blonde woman, and she may comfort you very well, and you'll be glad that she was there to help you do whatever you did. But if you're a young woman from the community and you see that, you think, that's a really cool job that she does. Too bad I can't do it. Because she's not seeing someone who looks like her do it. And that's what we do to ourselves. If we don't see somebody else doing it, then we don't think we can do it. So if you have Black birth workers in the environment, if you have Black doulas, Black midwives, Black doctors, Black nurses, then you understand that you can grow up and be one of those people if you so desire.
Absolutely.
But if you don't ever see it, you don't believe it. It's like now, any little Black boy can believe, God knows why he wants to, but he could be president because Barack Obama was president. Before that thing about anybody can be president, we go, yeah, but you're Black. Right. But now we don't have to say that anymore.
Right.
So it's just, what Is how it is. And so I believe that being a doula is a very wonderful career. I've never wanted to go on to be a midwife. I love being a doula. I love being there to support people through birth and to help them figure out what they bring home and do it in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're in hell. You know, that's my gift. And I don't want to do anything else. And I think, and I've done very well, and I have a very good living. And I think that if it's a really good career and it's a way out of poverty for people, if they learn how to do this and they can figure out how to navigate the system and make it work for themselves. So that's why we need Black birth workers.
I love it. So I'm just going to summarize what you said as the teacher in me, both of my parents and my grandparents, all in education. So we need Black birth workers because Black women want Black birth workers to be working with them. That's one. People are saying, I want somebody who looks like me, who's from my community, who I feel like I can relax with. Whether they should feel that way because maybe they could have relaxed with somebody else. Anybody got time for all those things? When you are in your like most vulnerable time, you need to be supported in the way that you want to be supported, right, with people who you feel like you can melt into and relax into. And for Black people in a very hostile racial society like we have here, it may be different for people in different communities and in different areas. I mean, you know, I'm originally from New Jersey, New York area. I've lived in Los Angeles. I gave birth in Los Angeles. You know, Linda is, you know, from the northern parts of California, and we've all had.
She's from New York. I was like, you're both from New York.
You know, and so, you know, but having different, you know, experiences in different locations. I also lived in Atlanta. I have a lot of friends who have worked in Atlanta. And so I know that there are environments where people may feel different, but I'm also traveling the country a lot. And a lot of my Black women are saying the same thing that we're saying everywhere. Everybody's like, I wish I had a Black blah, 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 just so I could feel like I don't have to put on airs while I'm, you know, laboring and postpartuming my baby and having my family time. The other part too that she said about the family members is also a very important thing because there are sort of nuances within everybody's communities and cultures that are kind of unique to them. And there are some things that are more taboo in other people's communities than not, and that are less normalized than others. There was a community-based doula telling me about a situation with a client recently where there were other family members that were causing all kind of havoc in the hospital. Like they were just, you know, going through their own dramas, and this woman's trying to have her baby, and the sister's doing this, and the mama's doing that, and the cousin's doing this, and they're all there, and it's a lot. But as a Black birth worker, it's like, yeah, that's the family, and you know, we got all these like interesting family dynamics going on that need to be maybe managed, and but not to say that a white birth worker or somebody who's not from the community wouldn't understand, but they may have a harder time sort of understanding how to negotiate all those family roles because maybe they don't have those kind of dynamics. And maybe it's not your personal family, but your cousin has those dynamics, or your nephew have those dynamics, like your sister, somebody in your family, even if you are a Black person, you know, of wealth and privilege, and I say privilege, I mean like earned privilege, right? Like, you know, and so, but you're one generation away from people that were struggling. You're 2 generations away from people that, you know, came from the South, and then 3 generations. I mean, like my grandmother, her mother was the first free Black in our family. My grandmother, I knew her my whole life. So her mama, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not that far from that experience, you know? And so I really, I think it is like sort of a misnomer, the idea that it's just about poverty and it's just about sort of like ghetto culture or hood culture or poverty culture. That's the Blackness. The Blackness is the whole experience. You could be very wealthy as a Black American, educated, and they still gonna come for you, and they're gonna come for your kids. And, you know, you're worried about the police, and, you know, you're not protected because you have money. And so I think that is also an element of this, that we're not just talking about struggling community. We're talking about the experience of being Black in a hostile racial nation. That's a very unique experience that it's not as easy to sort of explain that whole dynamic to somebody while you're pregnant, right? You know what I mean? Like, and how all those things are going to sort of play into maybe some of the dynamics of what's happening. And so, yeah, we need Black birth workers. We need people to do all kinds of fields, and there needs to be enough representation for everybody to have people, you know, that can understand and represent them. The other question too, even though I said you should ask the question, I'm going to ask this question to ourselves.
Yeah.
Why Black birth?
One sec. There are two things that I did want to just quickly pull out that both of you said, but first, Linda said, at the beginning of your career, you were able, or you, whether you were able or not, you made it happen. You served several people and they were free, yes?
Yeah.
All of them. Just because I know that this is a question that's going to pop up for others, because I know that they want to do the same thing that you're doing. How did you earn income?
I was doing postpartum work at the same time.
Okay. Just wanted to get that little detail because it's important.
And I don't want to encourage free help. I don't believe Black women should volunteer personally. I think we should be, especially now when we become the savior of all Black women giving birth. We need to get paid for that and paid a living wage.
Yeah.
If you want to volunteer, God bless you. But I personally am against all these institutions that want to use us to fix a problem that we didn't cause, but not pay us any money.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Ditto. We need to be paid.
I just want, sorry, Dr. Saida, Alexis, who's one of our previous students, she said that it resonated with her a lot, that she actually let her initial doula go in her pregnancy so she could find one that looked like her, that she was comfortable with, because she felt like she had this wall up during times when she would meet. And she hired her actual doula 2 days prior to going into labor. And Alexis is Black American.
Awesome. Yeah. It's it's an experience that, it's like, that's kind of what's happening a lot for a lot of folks. Not for everybody, but for a lot of folks. And I want to add to the money piece, because that was the other part I meant to pull out that Linda has said, that that's a job. Being a birth worker is a job that you can be paid for, that you can have a living in. And especially with the pouring in of funds to support Black maternal health, and people looking at doulas as one of the options, to help support that. There's opportunities for people to be funded to do this, and this can be a career. And we need to have more trained birth workers, lactation consultants, peer lactation folks, midwives. We need everybody at the table. And those are also jobs that you could have, and so it also is a way to bring income and entrepreneurship really to, a community that really can benefit from that. And that's not just for women who don't have money, that's for everybody. Because you can make good money in birth work, and the level of, it's such a passion work. I mean, it's not something you're just gonna do for money, but
yeah. And I think a lot of people, this is the kind of thing that people hear about and they go, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah, I love when
and
they
then
say that. Come back
about 6 months into it, after going to 2 births, they're like, screw that. I was up for 3 days.
Yeah, my back hurts.
My back hurts, my leg hurts. That was horrible.
Yeah, no, this has to be a call.
It has to be something that you really, really love to do, because it's hard work. It's hard. Absolutely. It's hard emotionally sometimes, and it's very hard physically. That's why I now only put out to the universe, I just want to do 1 birth a month now. I'm done with the 2 to 4. That's over. It's too hard.
Paid your dues.
Yeah. A lot.
I don't want it to distract from the next question that flows beautifully, but Linda, just real quick, did you take any extended periods away from doing births?
No. Well, I did. For 3 years, I worked with a family. I was doing postpartum for her. And when it came to the time for me to leave, she wouldn't let me leave. So I ended up staying with them for 3 years and working with her little guy and traveling with them and stuff. So I didn't do births in that 3-year period, but that was the only time.
And I did births, mine, I've always had, I was in grad school when I became a birth doula, and then I was working, and I was, doing night shift in the psych hospital and working in a prison. And so I've doulaed as people have needed it. So I've been a lot more of a doula connect. While I was in grad school, I was doulaing pretty actively. But I've always had a full-time job and doula. And I think that that's something also that people need to consider is an option, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I work, so I can't doula. There's a way to find a way. I'm doulaing in other states, which was quite crazy, but, it was like, all right, we're going to plan it. Your baby better not come too early or too late, but I'm going to come, right between the time you're due, and we're going to make it work. And the universe aligned it. But, I was able to, especially, with a good backup system and having a plan for, sort of like shared care. I think there's also a way for that to be available when there's not a lot of full-time doulas available, because one of the things that I see working with community-based doula programs, which is a little bit different than like your individual, you know, business private doula, is working with collectives, is that there's got to be a bit of a adjustment for the needs of, you know, community-based doulas. Some of them are not full-time. Some of them work but also want to do this work. And so if you can have a good collaboration, that's still possible for you to have a full-time job and for you to you know, to be able to provide doula support. And it's something that people, you know, it's, you got to work it out, but it's possible. And needed, especially for the Black community.
Or else do postpartum work.
Absolutely.
Because postpartum work
It's
you
more-
can
yes, you
schedule.
can schedule.
It's not, and you know when you're supposed to be there and when you aren't.
Absolutely.
It's a lot easier.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry for distracting, but Linda, I just wanted folks to know that they gotta earn a living wage, and they deserve to earn a living wage. And
Yeah.
please don't go into this thinking that you need to do a ton of free births. You can get paid
No.
as soon as
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
And I actually would argue, if you find that there's a community out there that can't afford to have doulas and you feel like they need them, get a collective of women together and look for funding and say, hey, we got a community that has a need. It's, you know, there's enough of us doing research to show that there's a need, especially in you know, people of color communities and otherwise, and see if you can get somebody to fund that, because that's possible. It's possible. I mean, and there's a movement happening, at least in the States, and you know, slowly but surely, with, you know, trying to get our government level insurance, the Medicaid and Medi-Cal in California, to pay for it, to have insurance companies pay for it. It's a good service, and it benefits those that are trying to lower the cost of birth, because
And they already have the statistics.
they do.
for
They know.
The doulas less than the cost of a birth.
Right.
So I don't know why they haven't done it before now, because they'd rather pay, you know, for an epidural and a C-section rather than pay for a doula who was a fraction of that cost,
Right.
to not have those things happen.
So yeah,
You know why.
I know. But you know, we're looking pretty bad as a nation with all of these C-section rates and women dying and all these challenges. And you know, the doula as an option, not as the solution, because certainly somebody else created the system, and I'm going to help, you know, my sisters through it, but that's not on me to prevent
Exactly.
historical oppression and racism and patriarchy and misogyny, all of that, with my like doula body, right? But we can help. We are showing, you know, we see that it helps to have doulas. So, you know, somebody should fund that.
Yeah, and
my
at this
argument
point
for
in
the world.
America, it's very trendy to have, you know, this kind of thing be funded. So you guys out there, form collectives and jump on this money, because it's out there.
Absolutely. While supply.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
sorry, Dr. Saida. Rebecca Trapto, who is on our team as well as one of our alumni. She's a Black woman living in Alberta, Canada. And she said, here in Alberta, we're advocating for doulas to be covered by healthcare, which is very exciting. And she said, and by advocating for, I mean, talking to our MLAs and other elected officials to work towards that. And Debbie was also saying, unfortunately, in our hospitals, Debbie, remind me where you're calling in from. I can't remember, sorry. Unfortunately, our hospitals don't keep stats for our births, so it becomes challenging. And that's a problem we have across Canada, is that it's really hard to move the needle because we have zero statistics, especially racially based.
Yeah.
And then Miss Charlotte is saying how powerful this is because we invited her as a guest of honor to watch. Because who the heck doesn't love Miss Charlotte?
Right, Charlotte?
Yes.
Yay, hi.
Yeah, she's here. Yeah, I also just wanted to connect that back to documentation. Hey,
Yeah.
like with your stories and documentation. But I don't want to distract. I keep trying to get them back to their questions. I can touch on that a little bit more because I'd like to bring that back up around stories as well as documentation in the birth space.
It's important.
It's important for if you form a collective, keep records of, you know, what the outcomes were, because that's how you get more money. If you can prove that what you've done is working.
And, you know, demanding that the hospitals, and, you know, and I know that's really like a policy level situation, that they are tracking these births. Somebody's keeping record. It's just where are they keeping the record and how do you get them to give you that info? But that's a first world nation y'all got over there. I would be surprised if nobody knows how many C-sections they have. And
Yeah.
I mean, unless you really don't code things by race in Canada like we do here, I think that would be interesting. And maybe they need to start doing that to get a sense of if there's some disparity. How will you know there's disparity if you're not tracking it?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's something that the Racialized Maternal Health Co-op here in well, we're not in Toronto right now, but back in Toronto, it's one of the things that they're working towards because they really want to show the outcomes for our Black and Indigenous Ontario birthers, because we don't have any stats around that to show the systemic racism in our healthcare in Ontario.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. So how to know if it's a white savior complex or not? I think this is an important question. I think folks that want to do this work with people of color need to ask themselves why. Why do I want to do this work? Like, is it like coming from a space where there's like this poor puppy that you see on the side of the road and you're like, oh my gosh, I should take it home and I should feed it and it's gonna become my thing, and like, or is it like you see that somebody should have information and access and options that you have and you're like, that makes no sense. Why don't they have options like I have options? I want to let them know about their options. I want to stand with them and make sure that they get the access. I want to use my privilege to be able to help them get access that they should not need somebody to stand here and get for them. Like, where's the energy coming from, right? And so I think it's really a personal question of like, where is the pull of wanting to help coming from? I think it's lovely, like that the heart is there, whether it's because, oh, this is a poor, lowly, suffering human and I want to help. I know that comes from a place of like compassion, but it also comes with a judgment that there's like some incapability there, or like without you and you facilitating the whole damn thing, that they're not going to be able to survive without you. When it's like if somebody's dragging the dog, I hate to use dog, let me just use a whole nother example because we clearly, I don't want to compare myself to a dog. But I'm just thinking of like the puppy thing, and everybody loves puppies and all this, whatever. But just like this idea of like somebody's like pulling your leg and you can't walk. It's like you kick that person off, that person can walk, right? So it's like we do have a situation where there's a system that's kind of holding people down and limiting them, and it's been doing that for a long time. And there needs to be a separation from
and
that.
those people who are doing it look like you.
Right. That's the other problem. So here's the problem.
Therein lies the rub.
If you come in wanting to help somebody and you are from the background, or you appear to be, or you have a cultural disposition, and you're in that dominant paradigm that is the oppressor, you wanting to help doesn't change the fact that you present as the person on the other side. And that has to be mitigated somehow. And to me, the first thing is, did anybody ask for your help? Like, why you're helping, you want to do something, you just coming up with your plans about what you want to do, or are you actually like asking people, hey, I see something that I don't like here. I see that what I like, for instance, if you're a white doula and you go in and you see that they treat your white clients differently than they treated some of your people of color clients, it's what it is, or that you feel like you saw something, then it's like okay to say, I feel like there's an opportunity for me to help in some way. Would you be interested in this? Do you feel, to ask people about their interest in your help? Because if you weren't asked, you've decided that you're the savior.
Then you're the savior.
Then you're the savior, and then you're the white savior. I mean, that's just like what it is. Like nobody asked you for your help, and you just decided, I see a problem that I think is a problem, and I know the solution, and I'm gonna come and bring my solution so I could fix this. And it's somehow looped around this like white guilt thing that somehow like you're doing something to make up for something your ancestors you might have had. It's a whole like thing that has nothing to do with what that person is going through, and it probably won't be well received because none of us were here during slavery right now. but we're all experiencing the effects of whatever we're experiencing.
In
And
different
so
ways.
in different ways.
I mean,
And
these
so-
skin suits weren't here. Yes, correct.
yes, we in these spacesuits, we
Yeah.
were not. We're
These
not-
skin.
you know, so the whole apology thing, or like coming from a space of guilt, is not really very meaningful, because it's almost like I don't need anybody to apologize for something that didn't happen so much before. I mean, that happened before. Stop doing stuff right now. You know what I mean? It's like if it was a slavery and it was a historical experience, but that wasn't we weren't still having
We were still
institutional
getting
oppression,
shot,
we weren't still
children
getting
dying
shot,
in
Black women
childbirth.
weren't dying. I mean, like, you know, all if it was all a history lesson, you know, whatever, right? But it's right now, people are still doing stuff, saying things, judging people,
Killing people.
you know, othering them. So then it's like, you know, what are you apologizing for? Are you doing something that you're not supposed to be doing? You know what I mean? Like, what's
You're
happening
not
here?
doing something you should be doing.
Right, or you're not doing something you should be doing, you know? And I think that people feel the need to the guilt complex that comes with the saviorism really doesn't come from like this idea that, oh, my ancestors are like people who look like me. It's because of all the times that people haven't spoken up, that they've enjoyed the privilege of being able to walk through and not be noticed, or to be able to navigate spaces and use their autonomy when they know they can turn on their little stern voice and, well, I don't appreciate the way you're talking to me. Oh, okay, ma'am, I'm sorry. You know, and you know that you could do that. And you know that you could do that even if somebody else is standing next to you and they can't do that.
And we
you might
do
have
it,
done
we
that.
get thrown down the ground with handcuffs on our back.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I think it's just an awareness when you realize, oh my gosh, I've received so much unearned like respect and autonomy, and I've used my power in ways that I didn't even realize I was using. And I feel so bad for that. So maybe if I help you, it's going to fix all that. And we can tell that that's what that's about. So don't do that. Like, that's just, that's what I have to say about it.
and that's not to say that all white people are white saviors, but it just tends to come off that way a lot of the time when it comes to things where they're trying to help us. You know, sometimes we don't need their help. We don't want their help. We want somebody who looks like this to help us. And
Right.
just because you think you can doesn't mean that you have the right to come in and just say, I'm here to help you. You know,
And what if somebody says, like, what if, and, you know, let's say somebody, you come, you have a good heart, you went to one of these conferences, you're on Bebo Mia, you're learning about oppression and social justice and all the amazing things in the world. And then you're like, I'm going to go back to my community and find some people of color, and I'm going to go and work with them. And they're like, no, thank you.
yeah.
Right? Now,
Now your feelings are hurt.
if your feelings are hurt, you might have had a white savior complex. Because, you know, it's like,
It's hard to explain.
yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's like, it's like, I thought you needed me because I perceived that you did. And so I decided that you did. And if you don't, doesn't that mean that you feel capable? That you feel like you got it? And isn't that a good thing? You know what I mean? So it's like, no, I don't need your help. I'm fine. Then that's like, oh, well, great. I mean, that's amazing. I'm my bad. Like, I just want to make sure that everybody in my community had what they needed, right? That's okay, right? To like want to help and we're humans. We got to work it out in real time. But there was a situation, you know, where there was a woman telling the story, and she told it publicly. So I'm going to tell her. I don't know her name. I can't remember. It was at a conference a long time ago. And she was saying that she was asked to go to, she was a midwife and was asked to come to an indigenous birth. There was a situation happening and the birth was not going well. And they went to the local midwife, you know, I guess outside of the res, I believe they were on a reservation. And were you with me? Yeah. And so, you know, they needed her help to do whatever, like, you know,
To fix the
emergency of the birth. And as soon as it was done and the baby was like going to be safely born, they escorted her out and said, thank you for your time, you know, have a great life. And she has been mad, I don't know how many years, it seemed like it had been maybe 10 years ago. And she was telling the story with all the suffering and the sadness, and she was so hurt. And all of us in the room were just looking at each other like, oh, for real? So you were given the blessing of coming into a sacred indigenous space to bring life to this planet when they needed you, and you had the skills that were needed because what they had at that time was not sufficient. And you did it. And this baby was brought to life. And you're mad because you didn't get to hear the song they were going to sing to the baby when the baby was born, or you didn't get to be a part of the ritual, whatever was going to happen. Like,
wasn't a part of that.
you're not a part of that. Like, this has nothing to do with you. You did the job that you do. You're a midwife. You brought a life safely to this world. You should have went home and just, I just can't even imagine. Like, what were you wanting them to do? Bring you into their whole family structure and owe you for the rest of their life because you helped save a child that's what you've done a mission to do as a midwife?
And that earned her the right to be a part of their private cultural thing.
And to be mad about it for 10 years. And I appreciate it. I really do empathize. You know, I get it. I get it, like, because I understand that where it was coming from for her was like, I don't know. I don't really know that I get that. I don't, but I know.
Well,
I
would
argue
I have a question from
I
Michelle.
just- you know, that's a problem. That's a problem if people owe you because you've helped them. You know, so like if there's like a bartering process to the saving, I'm going to save you, and now you got to give me credit for saving you.
And I have to do none of it.
It's social conditioning, man. Like,
Yeah.
I think, not to defend her, but like, I think in those moments, as the white person that's on this conversation with you, that I feel like I can say to other white folks is like, use this story as like, when that comes up for you, that's a time you need to step back and be like, why is this bothering me? And it's no one else's job to deal with that but myself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and if like you need to look within and figure that and unpack that, and do not bring it to the people that you feel quote unquote slighted by, because it's not their job and it's none of their business.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I just really wanted to add that as like, as the white person on this conversation for other folks who are having this, if you've ever had that experience, or that experience comes up for you where you feel like someone owes you something because you did something, that's not about them. That's about you, and you need to go and check yourself. And
that goes on by that person telling other people, this is why I don't deal with those people, because I did this for them and they were just not grateful.
Yeah.
It's not about grateful.
Yeah.
It's about we needed you for a certain thing. You did that certain thing. Goodbye.
Yeah.
You know, and people have to learn to accept that.
And I mean, it's human to have feelings like that, but I think there's also something in the racial conditioning around, like, you know, even as doulas, we might help someone, we might be with a client, and maybe the mother comes in and she, you know, and the mother's very nurturing and she's doing a good, like, she's kind of doulaing, and then like you kind of get slighted off and it seems like you don't have anything to do because maybe the partner is very efficient at like caring for her and she just wants to lean on the partner. That might happen, and you might feel like, I don't know why I'm here, like I thought I was here to help, right? Like that's a normal feeling. But you want me talking about that client for the rest of your doula career? Like, are you gonna hold it in your heart? Like, you know what, and this one time, this client's mama came in and took my role as a doula. Or like the partner was so comforting that I didn't have anything to do, and I don't really appreciate. This is why I'm not a doula anymore. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like, even as I say, that makes no sense, but it makes sense in the racial thing because we've been conditioned to feel like racially there's like this hierarchy, and like I've given you something that you wouldn't have had if it wasn't for me, because it's like that is, it's too caught up in a racial story that is really like about, I own you and I gave you something that you wouldn't have had if you didn't have it through me, and you better say thank you. I mean, and I think what people, we're not the feel anymore. Okay, like, and it's very important to understand the narrative.
How come you don't get it?
that plays out for people who have been forced onto reservations, right? People who have had their land taken away by oppressive folks, people who have been taken from their continent, shipped over for hundreds of years and given servitude to a nation, and then breastfeeding their babies and midwifing their communities, and they act like none of us know what birth work is suddenly, when we were the ones midwifing everybody in America. Exactly. You're bringing all of that energy to an individual who is just having a baby and trying to like have a baby and or like just trying to breastfeed, right? Or whatever it is, right? And like, see, all of that is why we need Black birth workers. Because all of this, like, this is, I mean, you're not going to, right, all this explanation, you're never really going to get the raw conversations like we're giving it, I think. Because, you know, I think we've gotten used to you, Alana. We love you, Bianca. We've been having these conversations.
So we're really just talking
to y'all. No, but I mean,
I'm loving this in the sense that like this is, you know, when we met before this class weeks ago, this is like, I'm like, oh, here we go. Now they've dropped into their, you know, how you guys do, and I'm happy that we got to build on our relationship so that everyone, as like our Black students especially, but everyone gets that gift as well. I did have Bianca want to.
This level of truthness. They really are.
Who's not ready?
There are people in your audience I would pretty much bet my life on who've either turned off or are going, what the fuck? Because
No,
yeah,
the opposite.
No.
The
Yeah.
opposite. We have
No.
white folks saying thank you for framing that in a way that like I understand. We have our Black Indigenous people of color that are like fucking blowing up with praise.
You see the hearts.
And so I have a couple questions. So
Wait.
No.
Okay, sorry.
it's about what they were talking about.
All
This is
right.
coming from the audience, not from me.
Okay.
I'm just shutting my white mouth. Okay, so Michelle is Black. She's actually mixed. I don't know, Michelle, which one you would prefer because you've said both, so I apologize. And was curious about that, how we take up space, we being folks who are Black or mixed, how they're taking up space. Does it make a difference if one is mixed because you are carrying some of the genes, or you have some family who would be of dominant, or I don't know, non,
I got it.
like you'd have
First
both
of all,
the marginalization. Yeah.
First of all,
Okay.
if they're in America, they're not mixed, they're Black.
Yeah, so this is going to depend. I think this is a
Depends on where you
cultural
are.
question. This is a very like, in certain places, your mixedness has its own like racial thing, right? And so, you know, it's like you're treated differently. Yeah. And you maybe it has like, you're almost like a part of a different class or a different like social group or a different like cultural group. But in America, thank you. You know,
One drop, it's over.
one drop, you were on a plantation and you were either in the house and somebody was trying to rape you all the time, or you were in the field working. One way or the other, that's slavery, right? So for me,
They're still Black.
and you're still Black, you know what I'm saying? You still can't own land and you still can't blah, 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 blah. You might have had certain privileges that light skin gives you, but I don't know. I mean, my sisters who are biracial, and who are just fair-skinned Black women, I don't know that I would call that a privilege in entirety, because even as a therapist, a lot of women that I've worked with that are lighter skinned, the kind of over sexualization and over just, there was the attention that they've gotten from white people because they're light skinned Black, and Black people because they're light skinned, actually gave them a lot more attention than they ever wanted, and was like a whole nother problem. So
Yeah.
I think this is going to depend on where you're at and what your culture is, but we just consider you Black if you consider yourself Black. So yeah, yeah, this is very regional. This is a very regional question. But yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm.
You guys, like, the chat box is blowing up. Like, you're getting a lot of validation. Everyone's loving where you're going. Keep doing what you're doing. Linda, don't doubt that you guys have gone off the rails. You're not. It's good.
Keep going.
But it is interesting you said that, Saida, because the mixed folks on the call are talking about their experiences of being othered, even within both their white and Black family members, because they're like treading a line.
Yeah,
They're not,
I mean,
they're not white enough and they're not Black enough, so they're just screwed.
the one thing I will say, my colleague, her name is Kefri. She's a longstanding doula in Los Angeles. She considers herself a Black woman. I consider herself a Black woman, but her mother was white. what I have noticed that she has taught me a bit is that, and other women that I've seen in different positions of leadership in this work in different ways, there is a sort of like a privilege or an opportunity to understand how to operate in some of the white spaces that are advantageous for you to sort of negotiate things for people. So I feel like she does have a way where she's been able to communicate things because she has white family. And so she knows how they hear certain answers, and she, you know what I mean? And so I think that there's some
So
value.
she's also not as big a threat to white
Right.
people because she's
Absolutely.
kind of like them.
Unfortunately for her, because she actually finds that people say stuff to her, basically trying to test out, like, does she align more with her whiteness or blackness? And so she is getting to hear, you know, some of the bigotry and things that maybe a white person would hear other people say, because they think, oh, you know, she's cool. I mean, Caffrey, you know, her mom is white. You know, Caffrey's one of us. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I mean, she's
Yeah,
like, I don't know why anybody thinks that my experience is the same as theirs. Like, I'm not a white person in the world. I'm a person of color in the world. And nobody has ever let me forget that my whole life. So suddenly I'm supposed to just like act like that's not a thing. But I think that that can be advantageous in helping people in the Black community also understand some of the nuances that are out there. Maybe there are things that people haven't experienced. I think in some ways it's sort of similar to being, you know, among like certain like classes of like education and academia, or in certain like socioeconomic levels where people think somehow that your money and your education has taken your Blackness away, and they can just say kind of crazy things in front of you. I mean, I find people say things to me sometimes and I'm like, wow, I'm not sure what makes people think they can tell me that.
Yeah.
Except for,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a thoughtful person, and, you know, I'm pretty calm in responding, and people know that I'd rather educate than like fight with them. But it's always still interesting. So I think that maybe that's a benefit, is that you kind of know both worlds a little bit.
Yeah.
Use it for your advantage, I'd say. Yeah.
You really see the good in people too, Saida. I think that that's what makes you unique in having those conversations.
I know, Saida, you're a good human, man.
Oh, I love you guys. You guys are great humans too.
But yeah, I think that takes a certain level of patience and compassion, and it feels based on what we've seen that you have a lot of that. And I know that for a lot of folks, that's just run out, or it's just not there for obvious reasons. Hey, and I think that navigating some of these.
Linda said she's not sure on her end. She's like, it might have run out.
It might be gone almost.
I don't know. I think Linda's pretty wonderful.
Anymore. So
next
But
question.
maybe I just have a different experience of Linda than some folks might get. We're friends now. She told me to brush my teeth with bottled water, and it saved my life.
Yeah, don't mess around with that tap water.
I know. But this is actually a really good segue into stuff. And honestly, like, if we don't get to our whole list of questions, because I do really think that everyone's loving. No, I know, I can see that everyone's loving when you guys are just like chatting about the way you chat. But something that I think this all connects is about creating community, because let's face it, there's a lot of folks that are the only still, right? And
Yeah.
so they're trying to navigate being on a collective, or even just starting out on their own as the only Black birth worker in their community, and wanting to understand like how they can create community.
I have
Yes.
a couple awesome things that exactly what you're talking about, please. Here, I texted it to you so you could read the question out.
Okay.
It was Mullibo Hang's question.
Oh yeah. One of our scholarship winners. Okay, in my area, the African community is growing, and myself as an African woman, I have heard horrible stories of their concerns and cares be pushed to the side. Most of them are not English speaking, and when I think of my own disappointments in my care, I can only imagine how scary and lonely this may have been. How do I begin to bridge this gap for us? And that's Molly Bohang.
What African community, what country is she from or talking about?
Specifically.
She's in the States now. Oh wait, no, I just made that up. In Hold on and remind me. Wait, she's not living in Malaysia, no? She's from South Africa, right? So from South Africa, living in Ohio.
Living in Ohio. So that just gives a whole
Oh,
context. Okay.
I know.
Ohio.
I've been to Dayton.
Yeah. So, okay, so the question is, how does she create community?
What I'm understanding is, okay, I've heard horrible stories, their concerns, most of them are not. So she's thinking about her own disappointments in her care, understanding now people that are wanting to birth and how scared and lonely they feel. How can she bridge this gap in what I can only assume is a predominantly white
Literally,
birthing community?
Ohio is the butt end of all of our jokes of people who are like not doing quote unquote the work. We're always like, yeah, they're from Ohio. And I'm so sorry for everybody who lives in Ohio.
If you are doing the work in Ohio, keep doing it and
But
tell,
we
tell
I
me
know.
how-
I was like, I think I was in Ohio lately, and I think they were trying to do stuff.
We also
So yeah,
use
you know,
Ohio and Utah.
in Utah, yeah, you
But-
can't get the bad rap.
but maybe
Utah-
volleyball hand.
She's in Dayton.
Yeah,
I mean, so I think the first thing is like there has to be some normalization of the fact that she's having that experience. And so I would just like go online and start looking for like African birth worker communities or other, I mean, in the Black community, you're going to find an interplay. So even like Black Mamas Matter Alliance, on the surface may appear to be, you know, about African American women, but many of those that are in leadership are actually African immigrant women that are, you know, who live in the States, may have been born here, but their parents are directly from the continent. And so there's actually a mix of people in there, of people who are Caribbean, and the same thing with Black women, birth, and justice. I mean, you know, not everybody we all are considered, you know, Black women, but there are African and Caribbean women that are also mixed into a lot of these circles. And so I think reach out and like talk to folks as close as possible to Dayton as you can, so that you can have people that you might visit. You know, I've been places where if I find, you know, I can't find a crew, then I just go where I can find the crew, you know, whether that means a long drive or a quick flight, or just, you know, doing phone conversations. But you need to get a collective or a community somehow that's as in close proximity as possible, so you can share similar experiences. You're going to have very different experiences with some of the Black and African birth workers in parts that are more populated with other brown folks. But that doesn't mean that all of us aren't working in isolation, because we still find ourselves, even in our own little towns, as the only Black people. We might be on a collective, but we go to the collective. We don't actually live down the street from each other. So yeah, you gotta make it, and it's a bit of effort. But I think once you get together with other people, you feel like more supported. It's not as hard.
you're so alone.
Yeah, you're not so alone. It normalizes, people give you suggestions, and then you figure out strategies of how to support women who are birthing and support families in ways that you might not have thought of, like in your own bubble.
And
Sorry, I just wanted to tell you.
Just came out with, we have a forum now. And I think people like her can join the forum and at least put the word out there that they're looking for community in Ohio or wherever. And maybe she'll find it that way. But, you know, that's one of the reasons we're doing it, is we want to provide community for people who are maybe isolated and don't have, you know, 10 Black women that they can sit down with at any moment. You know, so if you have at least people that you can talk to online that are similar to you and can listen to your problems, and, you know, you don't feel quite so alone. You're making connection.
Yeah.
So, you know, a plug for BWBJ Forum.
Yeah. And I actually,
Nice plug, Linda.
Linda's learning.
I love it. I love it. And I'll make sure that I email that link. But I just wanted to say that we did get the answer for the two countries primarily are Senegal and Mauritius.
Oh, okay. I think, you know, the other thing too is that a lot of times people's expectations for what birth is going to be like when they were born in another nation, and then they come to the States, or I guess even maybe to Canada, is different than what they experience. And so it's a lot about being informed. People are going in without information, and then they're like surprised that it's like so sterile and so unfamiliar, and it's so restricting. And some of those things you could know if you were to sort of like get that information ahead of time. And so I think people have to realize that they actually have to armor themselves a little bit more when they go into the major systems, because otherwise you're unprepared for what you would have needed to have like had a conversation with your OB about, or maybe you would have made the choice to go have a birth center birth or a home birth with a midwife than to go to the hospital if your expectations for what you would have would be so different. But yeah, it's rough for everybody, and especially if this is not the context that you have seen other people give birth in. But be encouraged. There's lots of us out there, yeah, get connected.
There's like, I know, like, there's Black Mamas Matter Alliance.
Matter Alliance.
There's, you guys in your forum. Do you know of any other like big ones that folks can start to connect with, and then start being like, where are you from, and connect across the states and North America, maybe even the world?
You know, I mean, Sister Midwife is in Louisiana and I think New Orleans. And so like sort of thinking like regionally, folks that people can reach out to. Ancient Song Doula, you know, they're out of New York. In the East Coast, Sister Song, reproductive rights and birth justice stuff in Atlanta is their home base. I'm trying to think. Obviously, you know, Mama Shafia Monroe Midwife has, you know, organizations, and she does. I mean, I know she does women's circles in Portland. And so that's kind of like in the area that can predominantly be pretty white as well. It's definitely findable, you know, it is like, you know, it's something, there's certainly, I would say most of the kindred partners in Black Mamas Matter Alliance. So if you were to go on Black Mamas Matter Alliance website, there's a list of who all the kindred partners and collaborators are. Black Women Birth and Justice is one of them. But they are Black women-led organizations all over the country that are doing work in this area. And if they are not doing like individual birth work in the way that you're doing, they would know who is, because they're going to be connected that way. So you could also take a look at the list of collaborators and kindred partners. I mean, I think there's over 30 of us. I mean, maybe even more that are members and you know, are part of the coalition, the alliance. And so you could you know, kind of get your feelers out that way. But yeah, and I would say if you want, you could also email me, because I actually travel a lot to do a lot of trainings and stuff. And so thank you. Jessica is saying, don't have anybody email you, girl. You don't have time to be answering emails.
I was like, whoa, that's really generous.
She's like, what? You
don't have time for that.
You're right. Email PWBJ. But if you say specifically that you're like lonely in the middle of Idaho and you need a friend, when I end up traveling to Idaho, there's always people in the audience. There are Black women that come and find me. There's only, you know, there's like 3 people in an audience of 800 people. And I'm always like, I should get your name and number just in case somebody else is looking for you. You know, like you guys are like an, you know, extinct population in these areas, but they're looking for each other. So yeah, I'm happy to connect people with whoever I can connect with.
Or you know what, like Linda, they could, like you, they could start their own, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because even though I'm part of Black Women Birth and Justice, I live in the Inland Empire, not even Los Angeles proper, which is like an hour and a half, 2 hours from me on a regular day. But there's a collective of birth workers that are in my actual area, and we create our own collective called the Sankofa Birth Workers Collective, just because I needed people who are my neighbors. Even though I love Linda and Jessica and Chinyere, I got to fly out here to hang out with Linda, right? And so I can't always be in Oakland, but I want to have, you know, sister girl time. So do it right in your living room. It starts in your living room.
Yeah.
get some folks and put them in your living room. Get some doulas trained, and then you'll have some Black doulas to work with. Definitely it's about making it in.
I mean, even if it doesn't even have to be women who are doulas or birth workers.
Oh, true.
You know, find some Black moms in your neighborhood and get together with them and talk to them about birth and their experiences. And, you know, that may grow into a collective because they go, I didn't know that thing existed, but let's work on doing that,
Absolutely.
you know. But don't look just for birth workers, look for other
True.
Black people, you know.
Yeah, or whatever community that you find yourself marginalized and not connecting. Definitely. Okay.
Do you want to answer the last two? Do you want to ask them?
Yeah, I'm
You
trying to
wanna
move so I can see. Okay, I will ask them to ourselves. What are some of the challenges facing doulas of color when supporting clients in the hospital setting, and how do we overcome these struggles, perhaps while experiencing some of the same mistreatment our client is? What do you mean?
Oh God. What we face is really gets down to disrespect, you know, because you're there as a doula supporting this woman. This woman has hired you, or you've come through an agency that has provided her for you. She is a professional person doing a professional job. And all the times, hospitals don't see that. They see another Black woman. They may know you're a doula, and it's even worse if they do, because then they're like, oh crap, now we got the angry Black doula. She's gonna be all up in our business, and she's not gonna let this woman do what we want her to do. And you know, it is what it is. That's what we have to face. What I tell young women when I'm training them is that this job is a job that when we go into a hospital setting, we're not invited in. We're invited in by the clients that we're working in, but we're not invited in by the hospital. And because that's what's going on, we can be uninvited really quickly. We can be put out in the street. They can ask us to leave. So if you go in there and you disrupt to a point where they think that you're interfering with what they need to do to get this baby out, because the baby is the client, not this person having it. It's the baby. They got to get that baby out alive. So that's their patient. If they think that you're interfering with that, you're gone. You're asked to leave. And then you can't help anybody. And you probably won't be able to go back again. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to alienate these people in hospitals. When I started doing this, I knew this is what I wanted to do until I can't do it any longer. And so I had to kiss a lot of butt at the beginning. But now I'm well respected in all the hospitals in the East Bay because they know me. They tell people, oh, you're the best doula in here, blah, blah, blah. I say, yeah, I pay them well. But, you know, I've earned their respect. And until you can earn the respect of these people, it's going to be hard. So you can, if you want to, go in and be the belligerent Black woman that they expect, or you can introduce yourself in a professional way and say, hi, my name is Linda. I'm here as Saida's doula. I understand all the rules of the hospital. I know that I'm not going to get into your way. I'm here to help her emotionally get through this labor. I will be here to help you, nurse, as much as I possibly can. And I understand, just like you have protocols as a nurse, we have protocols as doulas, and we understand what those protocols are. And if you have a question about what I know, ask me. But I'm really here to help everybody as a team to help her get this baby out. So, if you go in with that kind of humility, even if you don't mean it, you kind of have to say that to let you be in the present so you can help this woman and they can know that you are someone that needs their respect, that you aren't just some other Black girl sitting in a chair, that you are a trained professional that is here to help this woman have a safe birth. And I think if you go in with that attitude, then you'll go a lot further than going in and trying to go up against people who don't want you there in the first place. if they tend to mistreat you, then you have to tell them that you are a professional doula and that you don't appreciate whatever it is they're doing or saying to you. And I think that's fine. You know, they would do the same to you. So I think though, if you go in and establish who you are at the beginning, let everybody know that you're not there to mess up with anything, that you're just there to help this woman have a safe birth and to be as untraumatized as possible, and that you're just there to love on her and make sure she's okay, then everything's going to be all right.
I think it's interesting that, you know, I don't know how, when people are hearing you say that, how they interpret that. But what I hear too is like, this is coming from someone who has lived in the era of a very hostile racial situation in America.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you're going on the front lines in a hospital, you are aware that like, this is not to say a war, but this is a battle.
It's a battle.
Hence battling over birth. And the battle is to achieve the least amount of interventions and the birth that this client wants in a system that wants to intervene as much as they possibly can. It's like literally the protocol is, and then we do this intervention and then we're going to do this one. And we don't have, you know, it's like everything is around, and then you have to ask for permission to not have interventions, right? Like even to have saline drip or to have, you know, being able to walk freely, you got to ask permission because they want to intervene in your nature, right? And so, and that's just the nature of the system. It's just, that's the medical model.
protocol.
I mean, it's just what it is. And it is the protocol. And so what you're saying is that you look at that and you say, look, I'm going into a system that can potentially be hostile, and I have a goal to be able to support this person, and I have to
be there.
I have to be there to do that, and I have to lower this potential nurses, physicians, whoever, this hospital culture person. I have to lower their guard against me, this Black, tall woman with locks coming in here serving this client. I got to make them feel like they can trust me and manage all of the stuff that they might have. I got to prepare for that so that I can make sure that I'm here so that this person can have their birth. So what I don't want people to hear in what Linda is saying is that it's about patronizing these people in the system and making them feel good because blah, blah, blah. And she used the word kiss their butt. Like, it's, I'm doing what I feel like I need to do and what I've learned that I need to do to make sure that I could stay in the room to be able to
serve. If you're not in the room, you can't help them.
And I think that's really important to like dissect a little bit because I've heard this conversation in different, you know, spaces, and it's a lot about, it's coming from a perspective where people don't understand that people treat Black birth workers and birth workers of color and people of color differently than they treat white people. And so white women who have like been in the movement of the doula world have been having conversations about advocacy, which is a very different conversation than we're having, because our conversation is about this level of thinking way ahead of the potential that as soon as I walk in, my Black locks, powerful, autonomous, I know exactly what I'm doing. And I got this relationship with this client. She don't even know who you are. She knows me. We know that that turns people off sometimes, right? That can make them feel like they're threatened. And people feeling threatened, you may never experience what people feel like when they're threatened as a white woman. Because when do people feel threatened of white women? But when I walk into the door, people feel threatened. I haven't even opened my mouth and they tell me, I was so afraid to talk to you.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what it was going to be like. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I am like the most mild-tempered person like that you can have a conversation about in this conversation we're having. But I know that I present that way, and I manage that as well, even as an educator, right? And so I think I just wanted to highlight that what Linda's saying is also, it's overlaid into the impacts of like the racialized climate that she's been raised in, and in different generations in stronger ways than others.
And I've had experiences where like most of the nurses in the East Bay where I am know who I am because I've been around a long time. I know all of them. But there's traveler nurses that the hospitals hire, most of them from the South. And so when I walk into a room and realize that that's who's in there, I just quietly sit back. You know, I introduce myself. I don't assert myself, and they just watch me. And I just do my job. I don't get in her way. I just do my job. And by the end of the birth, they're saying, wow, I didn't think you were going to be like that. Boy, you were so helpful. God, I hope I do a birth with you again. But if I had gone in and challenged her, this woman from the South who would not think I was knowing my place, it could be gone a whole different way. And that doesn't serve your client at all. And then I had a client one time, and it was in a hospital that I had done, they aren't used to having doulas there, especially Black doulas. So I went in with my client, who was my second time with her. She was a white woman. And so when I left, the nurse came in and said, was that your doula? And she said, yeah. She said, well, do you know what doulas are supposed to do? She didn't do anything for you. She was supposed to be rubbing your back and bringing you things. And she said, no, if Linda had done all of that stuff that you're talking to, I would have made her go home. She knew exactly what I needed, and she was the best thing in this hospital for me. So yeah, I know what she was supposed to do, and so did she.
Yeah.
But they have a view of what they think you're supposed to do as a doula, and that's to rub people's head and rub their back and not do anything, or else be all over people when people don't need people all over them.
Right.
We've worked together before, we were friends, and she just needed me to be in her presence to have that baby. She didn't need me to be all over her and doing stuff. But this woman didn't know that.
Yeah.
She just, it's like, I can't believe that was your doula. She just sat there and didn't do anything.
Yeah, it's a culture of intervention. You were supposed to do something.
You're supposed to
like
do
my
something.
presence was the thing I was doing.
Exactly. And you hired this Black woman who didn't do her job for you.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, no, that's not what happened.
Now, was that a Black client or white client?
White client.
See, she would have never said that to a Black
No.
client. That's just interesting.
No, she would never say
It's like, your servant wasn't helpful. I mean, what the hell kind of, this is what we're talking about, America and Canada. Oh my God. This is madness.
So
Anyway, so good. That's a good story. That's a good story. Next
You
question.
guys should have a TV show.
Podcast.
Yes. Okay, I've served my community as an executive member of our local doula association. As the only doula of color in the association, how can I take an active role in educating and bringing awareness about birth justice to the association and the community? We have these conversations a lot, folks that I know who are kind of like the person on a committee that's a person of color. I would say, first of all, get connected with the community of other doulas of color that are doing, birth justice, social action, that kind of stuff, because these are also conversations we have among ourselves a lot, and we share a lot of tips and ideas. It's like I said before, it's very encouraging I have found that the level of like comfort that I feel about being the only person of color in the room, I had some of that because I grew up, I was in the honors program, and so I was one of the only Black kids in the class, and I just, I've had all these times in my life where that was my experience, and so I had some of that personally. But in this work and on committees where people are making decisions, where the decisions are being made about your community maybe, and the people who are making them are not from your community, like it's a very sensitive, sort of challenging, politically uncomfortable scenario. And so I think the more you listen to what people are doing as they're working that out in their other areas, you feel more comfortable and you feel like you have more tools in your belt as far as how to deal with difficult situations. Like, for instance, if people talk over you, and so you say stuff and you realize that everybody's sort of attending to everyone else, and then like you speak and, okay, that was a great point. Okay, so go ahead, Susan, what do you think? And it's just like, I feel like people are ignoring me a lot. I'm not sure if I'm going crazy or, what I mean? And so, but like, those are things that lots of us have experienced before. And in talking about it, you realize, no, I think they're ignoring me. I'm going to really pay attention to this the next time, and I might say something, but who do you say it to? And how do you say it? And like, how do you manage that? There's a lot of things that it's in the details. It's something I wouldn't even give like a general recommendation, because it all depends on who's on that council. Do you have other, individuals who are white people who you would call an ally, not people who just call themselves an ally? And I feel like we do, maybe that one, and maybe open the curtain. People who you could then maybe say, hey, I'm kind of feeling like I'm not being heard in this collective. I'm feeling like I'm not really like valued here. And I'm wondering if you noticed that. And they might be like, oh my gosh, I kind of felt like that too. But I was just, I didn't know if you felt like that. because this is the time to be an ally, to tell your ally friend sitting next to you, hey, like, hey, I feel like every time she talks, you talk over her, right? She could do that, and maybe she wants to do that, but it also could be like if you're the one Black person on the committee, or the one, you know, Latinx on the committee, or the one whatever Indigenous woman on the committee, and it's like, oh gosh, you're bringing race into this again. Oh my goodness, you know what I mean? And so it does take everybody who's awake to say something and to really bring it into action, but you may not have that. Maybe you're on a committee where nobody even gets it and they don't even understand, and they think they've done a whole lot because they found you and put a person of color on the board. And they're like, come on, we did it. I mean, you're here. What can you be complaining about? That's a whole nother situation. So come to the folds where we're talking about this all the time, and we'll talk about it more. That's my answer for that.
Exactly.
Anything?
Good.
Just to build off that, Maya wanted to ask, actually more building off the previous question, and also with respect to advocacy and ultimately handling yourself in the birth space. How would you navigate dealing and communicating with healthcare professionals in hospitals that are pushing a specific birth plan separate from what the birthing party wants?
Again, this comes back to having a relationship with the people in the hospital, if you can. I've gotten a lot done by just going out to the door and say, can I talk to you for a second? And say, you know, she really wanted this, or she really didn't want this. Is this really, really necessary for her to do right now? Or does she have to, or does she, you know, and you can negotiate that a little bit. But again, it comes down to, they have to respect who you are before you can do that, you know.
I think, you know, on the other side of it, I usually try to empower one of the family
because you can't do that. The partner has to do that.
Be ready for when things get pushed back. Should there be a situation where there's something that they're not listening to that the mom is wanting, and you know she's like incapacitated, as she's like in contractions every 2 minutes, it doesn't have the energy to like fight for herself about something. You know, I'll usually be like, hey, so remember we talked about like the moment where you might have to like have a conversation with the people because they're kind of pushed to something you don't want. This is it. You might want to say something. So I usually will just like turn it back over to empower the family to like become involved that way. Because otherwise, unless I've really established a really good rapport with the nurses, and it all depends on like if we're in the shift change and the new one just came here an hour ago, she doesn't know me, you know what I mean? And so I find it's better to have the family do that. But if she's by herself and I'm there, I'll usually ask a rhetorical question in the open room. That's like kind of a classic Saida thing to do. And it's like, you know, it looks like we're going to have to do blah, 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 because, you know, and this is what they're all saying. I'm like, I feel like I remember you saying that you really didn't want the epidural though, right? Like you were like, under no condition. Didn't you say that? Right? Well, when she's finished this contraction, can we have a conversation with her? Maybe you should ask her again. Like, so I don't let it be like they're talking to me and I'm talking to them. Yeah. It's like, I'm just going to note that something was said 15 minutes ago that was really clear that she said she didn't want that, and now you're saying something different. And instead of like all of us acting like, oh, well, we're going along with it because you said it, like I'm turning it back to her. I'm giving an opportunity for her to answer, but I'm also like reflecting in the space that like somehow we've lost the attention. Somebody's lost the focus of this person, and I don't like to do a lot of direct. And I think it's just like my working so much with doctors and nurses like throughout my career. I find it's more advantageous to have them talk to the client. Yeah.
And I try to teach them in prenatals that, you know, the way that I work is that, you know, I know what they're looking at. I know what they're going to get concerned about. So if I see this happening or coming about, I will talk to them when they're not in the room and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. In 10 minutes, they're going to come in. They're going to tell you they want to do this, 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 and this. So let's talk about that right now. And I'll tell you what your options are right now based on where we are in your birth, right, in your labor right now. And then when they come in and tell you all the same stuff I just talked about, you already know what I say, because they do not want you, when they say, I'm going to do this, you turn to me and go, Linda, what do you think?
Right. Yeah. No. And don't be that doula that answers that question for the doctor, because it really just creates a situation where, unfortunately, and it creates this idea that you are like controlling and like usurping the power that they feel like they have, and people will hold on to that for dear life, and like basically when they become threatened, they can start threatening the client.
Right. And
Like,
so
you know what, I'm the doctor, I know how to save your baby's life, this
Yeah.
doula,
she, what is she, does she have a medical degree?
right, it just gets to be a whole thing, like,
Yeah, and so you, and I tell them, once that you listen to what they say, as long as it's not a dire emergency, if you still have questions of me, then you say, John and I want to discuss this. Is it okay if we discuss this before we make a decision? And they have to say yes and leave the room.
right.
So when they do that and leave the room, then they can ask me whatever they want and we talk about it again. And then they come back and they get their decision. But you don't ever want them to turn to you and say, what do you think?
Yeah.
That's the kiss of death right there.
Yeah, that might not go over well.
No.
So it sounds like you're very like, to sum up some of that, is around like really creating the opportunity at all times for that client to engage their voice and their voice alone.
Yes.
Yeah, or the family.
Or the family.
Right.
Yeah.
If the
But also,
person can't do it, then their partner or whoever else is in the family can do that, because they have to listen to them. They don't have to listen to us.
Got it. It's a tiny bit different in Canada, is it?
Which part? Everything they're saying feels
It's the same.
same.
What were you gonna say? You think you argue
Me?
with that they argue with the staff more in Canada?
No,
We're
we're
the opposite. Like,
we're
we would,
precariously perched at all times, like because of private or because it's a universal health care. Doulas are kicked out just because like the OB doesn't like them or the like just doesn't like they're even in the room. Like the parents
Right.
have no right.
We can expel at any moment.
Yeah.
So people need to understand.
And I agree about when they look at you and they're like, what do you think we should do? I'm always like, no, don't look at me.
I'm like, I mean, should that ever happen to you? And I've had that happen. Like, well, I don't know. I think I need to talk to the doula. And it's like, you know what? I feel like what you're saying is that what the doctor just said, you don't understand. So can we do this again? And I like bring it right back to the provider. So clearly, because she feels like we need to talk about it, that answer was not sufficient. She doesn't understand. And I'll
Right.
be very frank, like I don't have another answer for what this doctor's saying. They're telling you you're gonna do an intervention, you don't understand it. Ask
We'll
all
make
the
you
questions you want to
understand
ask.
Yeah.
Ask all what else? I mean, and I have helped facilitate that, which is a little uncomfortable. Like you'd have to have a lot of skills in that dynamic. I would say like the first time you're a doula, don't do that. Like
Yeah.
that might not go over well, because you really do have to really stay in humility about it.
Mhm.
And it's more like, well, and then it's like, well, I told you. I mean, because I've had doctors, they kind of like, they're irritated now because she keeps asking questions and she doesn't feel comfortable, but like, you're not really answering the question. And so she's like, well, I just don't know. And I just feel uncomfortable. And, well, what if, can we get more time? And it's like, it feels like this is like really overwhelming. And I just start reflecting, like, it's all like therapeutic reflection. Like right now, it seems like this is really overwhelming. I'm not sure that anybody's hearing what anybody's saying. Like, and so, and just, and eventually we get there and it's like, basically she doesn't want to do it, what the doctor said, you know what I mean? And so she just doesn't want to do it. And it's not an emergency. And so they kind of just have sometimes just given up and been like, we're just going to come back in an hour. We'll see where we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Like, hey, let's just,
maybe we'll have a baby by then.
right. Like, let's just, okay, come on, relax. Because now, like all the fear-based coercion, everybody's agitated, the stress is high, and I'm like, oh my gosh, now we got to work back down to some like beautiful breath so we can get this baby out. Like this is so, but unfortunately, I do empathize because the medical model and the intention of the purpose of having a baby don't match very well in a lot of situations. And I think, the people trained that way are also at a loss of what to do in those situations as well. They don't feel like they know exactly how to manage that either, which is why doulas are super helpful. And if you have a good doula, you love having doulas in your births as a physician, as a nurse, because you don't have to do anything. You just come back, when we're crowning and,
Exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like earlier I said to Linda, why, the cascade of interventions, people benefit from that. The deaths, people benefit from that. Like it's bullshit. But you started off talking about stories, and since you're talking about the ways in which you advocate in the birth space, different ways in which you have conversations, and the intelligent ways in which you engage your client to use their voice, what about documentation in the birth space, and why is that important? And how do you get? Well, like for example, when you encourage doctors, for example, to document certain things in charts, and how you see that as soon as someone, particularly a Black birther, is aware of the importance of chart documentation, all of a sudden someone might not be suggesting the things that they're suggesting if you're going to ask them to document it in their chart.
Do you get involved in any of that? I've never got involved in any of that.
No,
Really?
nope.
I don't, and I've never,
Not my job.
and I've never, I've heard of that. I've heard conversations about that lightly in the birth worker world, but not very directly with doulas. So I wonder if that's regional or if that's just, we haven't heard of it. But is there a lot of that happening in Canada?
It's more around like some of the literature and buzz that's been coming out with respect to arming, particularly Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and also like South Asian birthers of, and like other birthers of color, around just providing them with different knowledge and tactics in order to protect themselves.
So what would they be documenting?
Or would you want them to document?
It would be like symptoms, outcomes, diagnosis, prognosis, interventions.
Yeah, no, we don't get involved with
Yeah,
that.
I haven't heard about any, I haven't heard about doulas doing that.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Miss Charlotte's asked times.
I've heard those conversations about them wanting, like, wanting certain things documented, and if situations coming up that they felt like it was important that those things had been documented, because then when the family complained, it was noted. But that's, I never heard those conversations come up in the conversations of doulas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We're not really privy to what they're charting.
Right. No, of course not.
That's interesting.
But I did, like, for example, though, when there's like, if you're advocating for a client, for example, and you're the only person that's there, and you're asking for them to be either checked or reporting pain, and nobody's responding to that, encouraging that be documented in the chart might speed certain things along.
So when you're saying documented, you're talking about, hey, can you let the next nurse know that she said she doesn't want an epidural?
Or like, can you let like she's been complaining of chest pains, or like there's been no urine output for the last 3 hours, or nobody checks her catheter and she's complaining of pain around it, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a north of the border. I've just noticed that conversation around the encouragement of documentation, no matter whether you are the client or a family member or a doula, an advocate of any sort.
I don't think the family members know enough to challenge that. And you know, there's been times when I'd say, you know, she's got an epidural and she hasn't had a catheter put in, and spend 2 hours. Now somebody might want to do that, you know. So but I don't know if they put that in the chart or not. I'm sure they did it, but
yeah,
right.
I think that with the legal stuff that's come out with the obstetrical violence conversations, and this has probably come out of these waves of like, what would have been helpful, like in hindsight, was that it had been charted, and so maybe some of this conversation is coming out of these cases and situations like that.
I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I never get involved with that.
And for me, it probably would be more of a conversation about, please let the next nurse know this. And since I'm there, I'm going to find out, hey, did you get an update? You know what I mean? But I'm not going to use the word charted. I probably wouldn't. Maybe I would. I don't know. I'd have to think about this. And like I said, this is not something that has come up a lot for me, but charting is very medical to me. And so I feel like I would have a conversation about, you know, what the communications had been. And I mean, I have had situations where, but you know, I guess I wouldn't really think of it as charting as much as, you know, please note on the little board outside the door that this is, you know, the birth plan. Can we make sure it's on, you know, and like, can you make sure that goes in the chart for the next, you know, what, like that kind of like light stuff, but not like make sure you chart that at 7 o'clock she said that her chest was hurting and nobody did it. We want to make sure it gets in the chart. I just feel like I don't know if that's a thing. That's interesting. I'll have to look into this and see how I feel about it.
I would never say it like that either, Dr. Saida, on a side note. But I'd be like, hey, she's been complaining, or there's like her urine's empty and it's been 3 hours. Like, is her line okay? I always ask things as questions.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff.
But not like, but did they note it in the chart? Like, how would you know they were charting it? Like, to even use the word charting is so medical. That's interesting. But for families, totally different. I think I would say that that'd be more of something that I feel like families in the advocacy training could learn. Like, if you got a situation and you feel like there's been too much bleeding and your wife you've been complaining and nobody's done anything, the spouse or the individual that's there could say, I've been making this complaint. I want it noted in the chart, blah, blah, blah. But as a doula there to serve and support my client, that's like really out of scope to me.
Miss Charlotte has a couple of things about this, Saida. She said there's been talk about this and some programs have encouraged their clients to use that statement around specifically like, is this in my chart or have you documented this in my chart?
I could do
That's
that.
what the family do.
Yeah, well, I didn't, Miss Charlotte didn't clarify if it was by like who it was, but that it's just been encouraged for folks who identify with marginalized communities. And then she's asked several times through the webinar, but wants to ask, what would you do if a nurse asked you for your doula credentials?
Well, I honestly wouldn't, to be honest, me personally, I probably would be like, I'm not sure. Like, I'm actually not here as a part of this hospital. My client has a right to have a support person here for her, and I'm here for her. So like, if you need something about me, this is like a conversation you're now having with the family because they hired me. Like, I don't know, but I don't know that I would get into a conversation about that. Like, that's obviously like a one-up kind of situation, and I wouldn't want to have that conversation. Like, I'm not here for you. I'm not here. I don't got anything to do with you.
And
Like,
in 30 years, no one has ever asked me that.
I mean, it's like asking a partner, let me see your marriage license. How do I know that you're the real partner? Who are you? Who are you? I'm not here for you.
Yeah.
So I don't
Start asking people that.
Yeah, if that's weird and that's a good question, but I probably would not answer it. I really wouldn't be. And I would say that, like, I don't feel like this is an appropriate question. Why are you asking me this question? Well, I just want to make sure that you're the right person to be working with her.
Can I see your nurse's credentials?
Right, like clients can hire whoever they want to support them.
Yeah.
That's it. And I can't imagine, I don't know. I don't know if somebody would ask me that. I feel like they might be afraid to ask me that.
They're afraid to ask me that.
Is that what you would say, Linda? Can I see
What?
your nursing credentials?
No one's ever asked me that. I don't think anybody would ask,
Maybe in certain areas, though. There are nurses
Maybe,
that
I don't know.
are
Maybe
like,
if she's so threatened, then she'd
Yeah.
have to have that question answered. But, I like she said, it's not up to her whether I be there or not. It's up to the client.
Would you say that to them, though?
What?
This is not like, what would you say to them?
I would say that the client hired me, so she's obviously checked my credentials and she wants me here with her. So it's not it's not about me being there for the hospital. It's me being there for the client.
Right.
So if they've asked me to be there, then hopefully they've done their due diligence about who I am, and that's who they wanted to be with them.
But I could see in situations where in certain regions where doulas are being brought into hospitals, where certain states are deciding that you have to have credentials in order to be a doula. Like, when we're in these different areas, there are different conversations. In California, we're not really leading in that conversation around certification being something that we're valuing. A lot of the doulas are saying that should not be the standard because that's not accessible to all people, especially a lot of women of color, and that the competency doesn't really necessarily match the competency to be able to work with community women. And so we're getting a certification to be able to serve who? And in what capacity, without any of the other like social determinants of health, without any of the understanding of historical trauma, like without any of the cultural nuances, like that actually, those skills that we're learning in quote unquote certification are maybe 25% of the skills that you would need to work with clients that have other social and cultural needs. And so who said that that's a certification? Like, I mean, they don't want to get into a conversation with me because I guess I'd have to go there. Like, do you know what the standards of the certification include? And, you know, so yeah, but I know in some regions they're doing that.
Apparently it's happening in,
New York.
in Texas, according to Michelle. And then Miss Charlotte says it's happening throughout the South, that it's a fairly common question of seeing credentials for doulas in the birth space.
Well, I tell you what, I think that the birth workers should come together and really do some think tanks about how to manage that, because that to me sounds like a very scary,
Slippery
slope and like an over policing of birth workers. For what purpose? I mean, who are you trying to suppress to be able to do the work? Who's not credentialed? Black and brown people working with marginalized populations. Like who are they really looking for? And why are you on a witch hunt for people who are, you know, sitting at the bedside and being a constant support for people who need it and who ask them to be there? I would really push back. And if you find me in one of those states, I'm gonna bring that up in my talk.
Have you followed any of the stuff with the bill for regulation with New York State?
Yes, I'm not loving it.
Yeah.
No, same.
I'm aware. And when it came out, we saw, I mean, you know, lots of us made recommendations about not doing that with the certification thing and not having these standards that then now almost like make certain doulas illegal, basically. Like you're out of competency if you practice. And it's a mess. And they were told that it was a mess. And, you know, we'll see what they do with that information. California is taking more heed to things. And New York is maybe going to be the grand experiment for what not to do as you come out with a policy.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so we're in California we're in those conversations with everybody thinking about how to do this at a mass level. And we're all saying no to the certification thing. It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's totally marginalizing. And hopefully that support, I know California has, you know, a third of the births of the nation apparently every year. So people seem to listen to California a little bit when it comes to maternal health. We hope that this will help other people as well.
You know, we do have to wrap up, only because we've gone way over time, unfortunately, for me. I don't know if you all want to get on with your.
Yeah, we gotta go.
We gotta get cute here, so we gotta get going.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that just to wrap up that conversation, I've been saying is, like, you know, there's been the rhetoric or the discussion, the words being used that like birthing system is broken, and I would challenge and say, unfortunately, no, like the system was designed that way. It's not broken. It's just rigged. And so with respect to regulation, and why we need to push against that is because then it just pulls us all into the system that's rigged against, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color. And, like, I'd say, like fuck that noise. We need to build something else and come from that. So, just to like close up some of my own thoughts around this and with respect to regulation, and if anyone's wondering, and hasn't heard a lot about this conversation yet, and you're a new doula, it's really important that we all come together and advocate against the regulation, because the last thing we need is the exact same system that's put us here regulating what it is that we do.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you can have standards. Standards are important. We need to know what's the basic competency of a doula. That's not the same thing as having a certification program where and the standards
White
can be
people
rigorous.
get rich from having brown and Black doulas go through their program.
Right.
We don't want that.
I mean, you can have expectations of competency and that there are certain, you know, literature that you've read, but who gets to determine what those are? I mean, the books that were on the list that I did were not the books that we're recommending. You know what I mean? Like, and it depends on the kind of community you're going to work with, whether or not the competency is going to be efficient. And so it really, it takes a lot more thoughtfulness than just like, oh, we need to go with a system that already existed. That's just, you know, that doesn't work. And please join us, those of you that are in places where you're struggling with that. Connect with us, you know, BWBJ, Black Moms Matter Alliance, like folks that are doing this work and in these conversations on policy. We're on committees, we're on boards, we're in think tanks. We're trying to figure out how we can answer all these questions for all these folks trying to create systems that will support the community. we're doing, many of us are doing this work too. So you know, like you can get support. I mean, I'm always happy to, you know, share whatever wisdom we've learned. But yeah, I agree. Regulation, who's
Not the way to
regulating
go.
for what?
Yeah.
What do you know, like what's the real bottom line? Who's going to be served? Why do they need this? Who's going to benefit from this regulation? Like go all the way to the end of the thought process. And if
Oh,
you get to the
right.
end and it ends up in some white man's pocket or some like medical system's pocket or some like big, you know, majority and dominant cultured organization that is not invested and implanted within a community that actually is the one that needs it, what are we talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We'll be encouraged.
Okay, well, I really don't want to keep you and from your evening and you're getting cuteness. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with? And just one more time, can you remind folks how they can find you? I'm pretty sure you have a page on that, maybe. Yeah, and use those hashtags. Make Jessica happy. Use those hashtags. Jessica, you can't see her, but she's there too. She
And
is.
we encourage all Black doulas to come and sign up on our doula locator and to join our forum.
Absolutely. That's it.
Thank you so much. I know that we didn't get to like all the questions, but there's lots of ways in which we can connect, or perhaps even we can find a way to bring some of those questions together and get them answered en masse or something like that. We'll figure out a way to stay connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Everyone is so grateful for the wisdom and the knowledge and stories that you shared. I am too, on behalf of Babel Mia as well, Saida, Linda, Jessica, and the rest of Black Women Birthing Justice. We want to thank you so much. And I also want to mention that new this session, thanks to Black Women Birthing Justice, they are going to have a scholarship named after them with Babel Mia, and they will be they will be determining the success criteria and selecting that recipient. So tell your friends. Black Women Birthing Justice has a scholarship with Babel Mia, and if there is a Black person that wants to train to become a doula, there is a scholarship, that one as well as others, but that one specifically will have its own criteria that we're really excited to share very soon.
Yes.
Thank you, Lana.
Thank you, Alana.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.